Hello and welcome to another edition of Executive Corner Expert Talks. I'm James Preston, and in this expert talk, I'll be sitting down with Peretz Schapiro, the non-executive chair of Monger Gold. Monger Gold is a resource exploration company with a highly prospective gold, nickel, and base metal projects located in the prolific eastern goldfields of Western Australia. The company is set to be listed on the ASX as of July 6, and to talk us through the finer points, it's my great pleasure to now introduce Peretz Schapiro. Hello, Peretz.
Hey, mate. Thank you for having me.
Now, look, really exciting time for you guys. I mean, such a short turnaround as well, getting listed on the ASX. From an investor point of view, what do you think the key reasons to invest in Monger Gold are? I know you might be a bit biased on this point.
Yeah, well, obviously, because we're the best. I mean, why else? Look, for key reasons from an investor point of view is we've got some highly prospective mix of brownfield and greenfield projects. And that's something that we are going to be actively exploring over the coming weeks and months, following up on some great historical data as well. I guess the real, point of difference is, because every exploration company really says the same thing, the real point of difference is our we've got a really tight capital structure in terms of our listing price. So in total, we raised $5 million. We had $10 million of bids. We only took 5 because we wanted to keep that structure as tight as possible. So on listing, we'll have 28 million shares and like 20 cents per share. That gives you a $5.6 million market cap with $5 million in cash in the bank before cost. So the $600,000 EV on listing at 20 cents is quite an attractive proposition. It's a highly leveraged proposition for investors in the space, and the downside technically is quite limited, at least in the short to medium term, considering cash backing. So from that perspective, I think we're quite unique in that sense. There are no pre-IPO shares which have been issued. There aren't any cheaper shares or free shares given out to management or anything like that. So all investors, including myself, have all come in at the same price at 20 cents per share. And we're really excited for that leveraged opportunity and hopefully to produce wealth for our shareholders.
Yeah, sounds terrific. And all the books are in order. That's always a good starting point for any new business listing on the ASX. Can we go into a bit more detail about the structure itself and how many shares have actually been offered to the public?
Sure. So the public was offered 25 million shares at 20 cents per share. And then there were 3 million shares that were issued to Torian Resources in exchange for the project. Now, importantly, those shares are escrowed, so no risk of them being those 3 million free shares being dumped onto the market straight away. So in total, that gives us 28 million, actually 28 million and 1 shares to be specific, in total of what will be outstanding.
And in terms of ownership structure, how does that sit within the company and then also with the public?
Sure. So in terms of ownership structure, Torian Resources has that 3 million shares. That gives it about a 10.7% stake in Monger Gold. And then that combined with our top 20 holds about 62% of the company. So it's a really tight register. We wanted to keep it as tight as possible. So we just got over the line in terms of having those 300 names to spread. And we're quite selective as to who received that as well. So hopefully by keeping it tight, keeping it small, that can give us incredible leverage and great lift up to the upside. Should results be positive in our favor and forthcoming shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's backtrack just a little bit to that $5 million IPO itself. Why did you decide to go for that particular fund amount, and what was the sort of considerations you were looking at when you were looking to, I suppose, pencil in what that amount would look like for the IPO?
Sure. So essentially it goes back to what I was saying before. There are many exploration companies on the ASX, and many of them have really good projects and prospective projects. For us, it was about trying to find a hook for investors that would attract them to our company. And it was quite clearly our ability to offer that really tight, small capital structure and that tight market cap. Again, I go back to that word leverage. It really does provide that leverage opportunity. So that was the reason for raising that 5 million, kind of the minimum amount needed to raise to list on the ASX or just above that. And it enabled those that wanted to get in at this level to get in. And, it was obviously a public offer. It was open to the public. But, being able to keep people I guess, a little bit hungry. Obviously, by having been doubled oversubscribed, we weren't able to give everybody their allocation. And that enables us to set a really strong, firm and tight foundation to lift up the upside. I mean, had we raised $10 million and taken all that, we'd have 50 million shares on issue. And again, having more shares on issue you have, if you want a higher share price, which is what all investors want, would mean you'd need even better results, right? You need to be twice as good to hit the same share price as opposed to if you just raised the $5 million. So it's simple finance mathematics in terms of being able to provide investors with the greatest opportunity to grow their wealth.
So there wasn't a huge temptation then to go a bit higher?
Well, there's always temptation to take the money if it's on the table, right? But ultimately, we go back to our why. And our why as a business is to grow shareholder wealth and to increase shareholder value. And therefore, the easiest way and the most expedient way of doing that is to keep the structure as tight as possible.
Peretz, I think that's something that our viewers are definitely going to be absolutely thinking that's music to their ears. How do you plan to use the funds that you've raised? I know you've talked about having this sort of tight capital structure and making sure that it will be heading back into their pockets. But if we can break it down really specifically, where are the funds going to go towards?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there's listing fees, which is a couple $100,000 to get listed on ASX, etc. But most of the money, the majority of the funds, or the vast majority of the funds, I should say, will be spent on exploration, putting money into the ground. I mean, if we look at our corporate costs, for example, there are 3 non-executive directors, myself being one of them. And between the 3 of us, in terms of salaries, if you want to look at it that way, it's only about $100,000 per year between those 2 directors. So again, relative to our peers and others in the space, that is quite low as well. We have a full-time exploration manager, and he's being remunerated accordingly, but ultimately that is money spent on exploration. We're looking to spend money on a drilling campaign at our flagship project coming up in the coming weeks and months, and on further exploration throughout the 3 projects that we've identified in the prospectus and that are available to view at the presentation. So the majority of the funds, the vast majority of the funds, will be spent in the ground.
Yeah, and I guess that's something that you need to do as well, given you guys are somewhat of a fledgling startup. I know you've obviously been under a larger umbrella in the past, but it's a pretty crazy story for you guys from November and now through to July and already on the ASX. That must feel incredible.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're lucky in the sense that the projects were essentially spun out of an existing listed company that could have raised the money on its own, that being Torrent Resources, but essentially they felt that because it wasn't their flagship project, they wanted to, if they were to invest funds, if they were to, raise the money to invest in these projects, it would be further diluted for their flagship project and the rest of their shareholders. And Torrent's idea was by being able to sell the assets and maintain an interest in the company, and they have an interest in the JV as well, 20% free carried interest until BFS, that gives them the greatest exposure, that gives their shareholders the greatest exposure to the upside, as opposed to just keeping within Torrent and not doing much work on it. So from that perspective, we hit the ground running straight away to be able to, okay, now that we've got these assets, let's get this listed, let's raise the funds, and let's try and bring maximum value both to obviously Monger shareholders, but then by default, as such, that would mean that brings value to Torrent shareholders as well.
Absolutely. Now, look, we've kind of talked about this a bit already in terms of where you're looking forward to into the future, the reasons behind the IPO. But what do you think Monger Gold's core strategy is?
Well, I guess as any company, like any exploration company or any exploration startup, really, its core strategy is to increase shareholder wealth. And we do that specifically through resource exploration, and in this case, particularly gold. But our strategy is to increase shareholder wealth, and that is our why. That's why we exist. And that goes back to all the decisions that we've made. Why we decided not to take all $10 million. Why I've decided to keep the capital structure as low as possible. Why I've decided to keep our corporate costs as low as possible. And while we will be spending as much money as we possibly can, but in a targeted way in the ground to be able to continue to deliver on that mission.
It's probably not a bad time as well to actually target on the gold itself. We've seen over the past probably 18 months, by obviously quite a strong correlation with the COVID pandemic coming through, the price of gold and spot gold, they've both gone up through the roof. Do you think it's a really good time now to be doing what you are doing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there is the gold market has come off a little bit from where it was last year, but look, in my humble opinion, I should say. I guess everyone's got an opinion with regards to gold. I believe that gold is incredibly undervalued at this point, and with the amount of money printing that's going on around the world, and with cryptocurrency being shown not to be what people thought as that replacement for gold, given its incredible volatility and a way of being able to grow and destroy wealth within days. I think gold for most investors is a much safer bet with a hedge against what I believe is rising inflation. We're seeing that in the United States, we're seeing that in Europe, and I believe we'll most likely see it here in Australia as well. Rising inflation coupled with interest rates that have to stay low. The amount of government debt and private debt, interest rates can't afford to go up. So if you've got higher inflation, you can't lift interest rates. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I think that really bodes well, particularly for gold.
No, it's well said. I mean, they always say that precious metals are often a safe haven. It's something that you want to hold on to as long as you can. Let's have a look now at the overview of your projects that are already operating. What is going on with the existing ones? Yeah,
sure. So we have our flagship project is our Monger North project, and that is located about 50 kilometers southeast of Kalgoorlie. It's previously been held by companies like Newmont and Silver Lake Resources. Some of the historical intercepts on that project, this will be our immediate targets as we follow up our exploration campaign and with an RC drilling campaign shortly, include intercepts like 3 meters at 21.4 grams per ton from 24 meters, or 3 meters at 11 grams per ton from 9 meters. There's some pretty decent hits that we're going to be following up over there. There's been quite a bit of drilling done in those areas in the past, and that gives us great data to therefore vector on our most prospective parts. I mean, the project itself is located adjacent to the Silver Lake Daisy Milano complex. In that specific region, it's produced in excess of 1.6 million ounces of gold. So it's quite a prolific region, and it's a great neighborhood to be in. And our task is to find those high-grade deposits that the region is known for. We're sitting along strike from a Silver Lake open pit, which is now held by Black Cat, the Wombolo Dam, 27,000 ounces open pit, which literally sits right next to our tenure. So we're quite excited about our prospects there at Monger.
Well, Peretz, you kind of touched on it there a little bit, but you've got this exploration program that is soon to commence. How do you think you're placed for those developments now that this IPO has come out? And obviously there's a bunch of the activities you're doing at the moment to just assess how potentially brilliant it could be for you. How do you think you're placed moving forward?
Right. So I think part of the IPO process of having to prepare a prospectus and having to do an independent geos report actually really helps us moving forward, as we've been forced essentially to take a really good look at the data from that point of view. As I've mentioned earlier, we've recently employed a full-time exploration manager who's taken another look at all the data that we've been able to, get our hands on, both from Torian and from previous exploration companies and whatever's in the database. And that's given us a really good understanding of what we're sitting on, where we can focus our drill bit, essentially, where we focus our funds. Yes, we have some greenfield projects as well, which is like really blue sky. Like, who knows? It could be amazing. It could be nothing. So you've got that exciting element as well. But particularly with Monger North, which is more brownfield and at the same time does have a lot of potential in terms of what it can bring. So I guess back to your question there, we've been spending quite a lot of time on that analysis and building those geological models so that when we do put serious cash into the ground, it's spent in a place that gives us the best chance of success.
Absolutely. Now, Peretz, just before I let you go, which of the company's activities should the market have an eye on following your ASX listing?
Yes, the company should have an eye on our ongoing exploration program, our target generation, and then, of course, a drilling campaign, which will be coming up in this quarter. So I guess those are the key milestones. I haven't touched on some of our other projects, like Gibraltar and Monger South. We'll be doing some work there as well, and most likely a drill campaign in Gibraltar towards the end of this year, 2021. So those are the key milestones that we're looking forward to. Hopefully the company should keep an eye out for our next quarterly, which will show, as I've demonstrated, a healthy cash balance and a low burn rate of corporate spend. So that's our commitment to the market, and that's our commitment to our shareholders, and we hope to be able to deliver on that commitment. And look, We hope to make some positive discoveries, and we're excited to be able to do that. That's why we're in it. That's the game. That's the rush of finding gold. And should we do that and be successful, then we be able to deliver outstanding results to our shareholders.
Well, look, I got my fingers crossed for you, mate. I want to see these new companies coming into the player, shaking it up a little bit for those bigger ones. Now, if we want to keep across everything that Monger Gold is doing, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I guess follow us, put us on your watch list on your trading account. I'm sure your viewers would have the watch list, and they can see our website at mongergold.com.au. And they'll be able to follow information there and follow ASX releases on our team.
Well, brilliant, mate. Fingers crossed, and best of luck with all your exploration, Peretz. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you, Steve. Really appreciate your time as well.
That's Peretz Schapiro, non-executive chair of Monger Gold, who have been listed on the ASX as of July 6. If you've missed any of the chat or you'd like to catch up, or you're interested in checking out any of our previous expert talks, simply head across to our YouTube channel, 𝐾𝐞 Media. And of course, remember to stay apprised and invest wise with 𝐾𝐞.